All right. We're sorry to steal you all from the children's choir out there. It's pretty beautiful. We're a nice way to start out a Friday to come in with the children's choir singing in the halls, echoing through. So reminds us that there are still very good things happening in this world. Sometimes it can be harder to see than others, but as we get to the end here, it's nice to have these kind of brightening moments. I am so thrilled to be here with you all this Friday with the incredible members of the Senate's Women's Caucus, which is some of the most talented people I have the opportunity to work with on any given issue on any given day. And I will hand it over to them in just a moment for some remarks and for questions that you all may have about issues that are facing us this General Assembly session. I just want to touch on a couple things from this past week. Obviously, we are in the final stretch here with 10 days to go. And today's Senate floor session, Monday and Tuesday, will be instrumental for what the world looks like for the 2025 session. I'll start first with the state budget. Yesterday, we received the House's version. The next day, today, the Senate will be putting its version onto the floor. And what is very clear and what is the most important to note about this budget is that it is fiscally sound. It invests in all of our core priorities like public education, public safety, and healthcare. And it raises revenues from those who can most afford it while protecting against the inevitable uncertainties that are coming from the administration. It is a sound budget that I think makes the appropriate efforts to put Maryland on as solid as footing as possible given the level of uncertainty that we have. The budget and the BRFA will both be on the floor this afternoon, and will be laid over for debate on Monday, and hopefully will be out of the Senate by Tuesday. We'll do a joint budget conference after that with the House to have a conference committee report fully completed by the end of next week. So the goal is to have it done before sine die, so that the most important piece of legislation gets done with plenty of time ahead. I want to thank our Budget and Taxation Committee. They have done Herculean work, but all members of the Senate have contributed in this process. The budget is our most important document because it's not just numbers. It is a reflection of our values, and the Budget and Tax Committee has been instrumental in making this possible. I also want to thank the governor's team. We've been working very closely and very hard to try and find a balanced medium approach that at the end of the day is 2 times cuts to every $1 raised to balance. So with that, we know we have a few differences that will get worked out in conference, and glad to take questions afterwards on those. Second note is the Leadership Energy Package, of which includes the Next Generation Energy Act that passed out of the EEE committee with the long-term planning bill, Senator Hester's bill, unanimously yesterday. These will be on the floor. The whole package will be on the floor on Monday. Overall goals remain the same. We're going to be focused on generating more affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy than we have today here in Maryland. This energy package gives Marylanders more control in the short term, in the midterm, and in the long term to lower utility bills and address the threat of climate change at the same time. One note I want to put out there that I think may have gotten missed, and we'll have more details over the next week, is that part of this package includes a $200 million relief plan of CEF funds to give residential electric customers a direct rebate, likely through 2 installments, one in the seasonal impact of the summer and one in the seasonal impact of the winter. These will be immediate relief for ratepayers who we know are feeling it harder than ever. Lastly, the blueprint bill will be on second reader today. This is a negotiated bill that we think that we've reached a reasonable compromise with both the administration's approach and the House's approach that will allow us to ensure that our public schools truly realize their fullest potential. Now, with that, I'm going to hand it over to our majority leader. Before I do, we have 14 incredible members of our women members of our chamber. There have been 259 Maryland legislative women who have served in the General Assembly since 1921, of which 60 of whom have served in the Senate. On a personal note, a lot of people talk about the influence of my predecessor on the impact of the Senate. And while certainly he had a great deal of coverage and focus, from my perspective, in my first 10 years, I looked at some of those members who are here with me today, but I think back to when I first came to the EHE committee at the time and was placed with Joan Carter Conway, and was next to her and was in the vice chair office. I think she was there to kind of keep a strong arm on me to help me navigate the Senate. And a strong arm she did. And I always joke that everything I know about the Senate is what I learned through those years with Joan Carter Conway. And you fast forward to sitting on the floor with Karen Montgomery for my first term and learning from her depth of experience, or riding through Rockville with Jenny Forehand, who showed me her district and told me how important constituent services were. Or when things were changing in the Senate and Dolores Kelly reached out to suggest what the Senate should look like moving forward. For me, for my experience in the Senate, it is the women legislators of the Senate who have really shown me what this place is and should be. And I am just so personally thankful for each of these members and for all of the women who have served in the Senate, who have really set the stage for what true collaboration and leadership can look like here in the state of Maryland. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our Majority Leader, Senator Nancy King.
Good morning. This is a perfect morning to be celebrating Women's History Month. We've all taken a few days during the month to talk about women in the Maryland legislature history, and it's been great to be celebrated. When I first came to the legislature in 2003, the women were still celebrating the fact that we had gotten a women's bathroom where there hadn't been one before because there weren't enough women. And when Pauline Menace got there, she jumped right into it. It was called potty parity, I think. So thinking back, you see how far we have come since those days when Pauline Menace first came to the legislature. When I first came, I have to admit that I would worry sometimes about whether I was just a woman being here, whether my opinion mattered. And as the years have gone by, that has really shown to me that my opinion does matter. Of course, our president is fantastic in working with all of us and taking our opinions along with everybody else's. And I don't think very often that we stop and think, is this a woman's opinion? Is it a man's opinion? We work really well together and talk things out, and we don't have to emphasize whether it's a man or a woman when we're in a conversation. I guess that's the thing that I appreciate the most about being here in the Senate right now. And I've got Senator Hettleman, who is going to speak after me, and if we have any questions for any of us, we're welcome to take them.
Thank you very much, Senator King, and thank you very much, Mr. President, for having us all here today in recognition as we wind down Women's History Month. I want to take a couple of minutes to reflect on the remarkable contributions of women throughout the history of the Maryland Senate in particular, and how many of them have shaped our communities, our laws, and our future. I know that I stand on the shoulders of women in my neck of the woods who came before me, Rosalie Silber Abrams, and with the president's support, we have a portrait of her now in the James Building, who was in Baltimore City and Baltimore County area, Senator Barbara Hoffman, who I knew when she served here as chair of Budget and Tax, and Senator Paula Hollinger, who I had the opportunity to speak about on the Senate floor, and who 30 years later I represent the same area that she did. In 1935, the first woman was elected here, Mary Ristow, and she served in the House prior to that before she came over to the Senate. In 1962, Verda Welcome became the first African-American woman to be elected to the Senate. We had our high water marks in terms of numbers in 2023 and 2024. That was the highest percentage of women in the Senate, topping off at 16 women holding seats, about 34%. I actually had 59 women. We'll have to compare our numbers in the Senate, and 245 in the House. Currently, there are 14, and I am so blessed to be able to serve with these fabulous women here today, and all of us. Yet we only make up 30% of the Senate, and we make up almost 52% of the population of Maryland. There are other states out there that have broken through that glass ceiling. Nevada has almost 62%, New Mexico, Colorado, there must be something in the water out west. But we here, I just wanted to say, as we close out Women's History Month, let us not only recognize the extraordinary achievements of women, both past and present, but commit to shaping a future where women have equal representation, opportunity, and influence. And today, along with my wonderful colleagues, we honor the progress that's been made toward this goal and acknowledge the challenges that remain as we stand steadfast in our commitment to ensure that progress is not just celebrated, but actively advanced in each and every space that we occupy. And as I was thinking about these remarks this morning, I reflected back on Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's comment, "Until there are 9." Do you remember the question? Is when will there be enough women in the Supreme Court until there are 9? Well, until there are 188, with all due respect, Mr. President. So let's continue to work towards that. Thank you. And I will turn it over now to Senator Henson.
Thank you. There's been so much impactful legislation this session that impacts women. We have legislation affecting childcare, health care, family law, all different areas and aspects of our law that have a huge, tremendous impact on women. But there are 3 bills I'd like to uplift for the purposes of this press conference. First, I'd like to start with Senate Bill 632. This is the bill that tackles our Women's Pre-Release Center, the Monica Cooper Pre-Release Act, sponsored by Senator Mary Washington. She's been a tireless advocate for this bill. You all know that a few years ago, we embarked on the journey of getting a women's pre-release center in Maryland so that women who are released from incarceration have the wraparound services and support that they need to reenter the community, to make sure that their healthcare needs, behavioral healthcare needs, education, workforce opportunities, housing, making sure we have a center where they are reintegrated into society in a way that they're set up for success. So Senator Washington introduced this bill this year just to reaffirm our commitment to that and to let it be known that we still fully anticipate the Women's Pre-Release Center to be realized. And with her legislation, we know that we are one step closer to that. I also want to uplift Senate Bill 511, the Pregnant and Parenting Student Support Act. It's a bill that I filed and we graciously passed here in the Senate. One of the key aspects of the bill is that it would codify Title IX into Maryland state law. We understand that we have some shifts at a federal level, different commitments that have been made over time, changes are being made to those commitments. So now, more important than ever, it's important to make sure things like Title IX are codified in state law. What it would do is it would make sure that students who are pregnant or parenting have support if they are ever discriminated against by way of pregnancy, termination of pregnancy, or recovery from pregnancy, so that students in those positions know that their academic institutions will hold those seats for them in class. They'll make sure that they have those supports that they need to be parents and to still continue their education. So we are tremendously proud of that work. And then the third thing really builds on a body of work that we've embarked on since the 70s here in Maryland, and that's protecting survivors of domestic violence. Senate Bill 721, which I was also blessed to be able to sponsor, is a bill that would allow us to codify permanent protective orders by consent. So our protective order statute started out where you could gain a protective order under certain conditions, and then we moved towards the adoption of a permanent protective order if people needed a more long-term relief from abuse. One of the things that we're adding to that feature is to allow people to consent to a permanent protective order so that survivors of domestic violence don't have to spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, but they have the opportunity to have that support from their state, from their government, by way of a permanent order where they can always use that as a tool and a resource to gain the resources that they need to flee domestic violence and to remain safe. So again, those are just 3 of the things that we've done that support and impact women. Much of the legislation that you see coming out of the Senate this year would support women and to make sure that they can thrive, be it academically, in the workforce environment, making sure they have support and resources so women can contribute to make the significant contributions that you've heard about today. And with that, I will turn it over to Senator Guile.
Thank you very much, Senator Henson. Good morning, everyone. I'll be brief because I know I'm standing in the way of some of you here at wanting to ask questions of the Senate President with respect to the budget. So, I wanted to reflect a little bit about being a woman in leadership, and in particularly being a mother of small children. I know that there's some women here that are parenting small children at home, and the balance of that was serving in leadership. So this morning, like so many mornings, started in full-on mom mode. I got my 3 daughters out the door for school, my 8th grader, my 3rd grader, and my 4-year-old. And let me tell you, there's nothing like trying to navigate a toddler breakfast preferences, middle school outfits, while reviewing briefing notes for committee hearings and simultaneously trying to find the letter K for show and tell. Once I kissed my youngest goodbye at preschool drop-off, it was time to switch gears to prepare for a full day of meetings, legislation, and service in the Maryland Senate. And as hectic as that morning routine can be, I carry it with me into my work because it reminds me every single day why I do this. During Women's History Month, I find myself reflecting on the path that brought me here and on the shoulders of the women who came before me. Women who fought to be heard, to be counted, and to be represented in rooms of power. And I think about how each of us, in our own way, is continuing that work. Being a woman in leadership, especially in elected office, comes with incredible purpose, but also, let's be honest, real challenges. There are days when I feel the weight of missing soccer practice or not being there at bedtime. It's hard, and it's the push and pull that so many working moms feel, but maybe with more committee hearings and floor sessions thrown in. And yet, when I look at my 3 daughters, I know that the example I'm setting is meaningful. They see their mom showing up, not just for them, but for our community. They see me and my fabulous colleagues here working to pass laws that make life better for Maryland families on issues like education, healthcare, especially access for women's healthcare, reproductive care, abortion care, and economic opportunity, and more. And I hope they're learning that leadership doesn't mean having all the answers. It means showing up, doing the work, and lifting others as you climb. Of course, I also get a little feedback on my work at home, sometimes delivered in eye rolls or one-word responses. But I do consider it a win that at least my 14-year-old likes my posts on Instagram, and I'll take that algorithmic support whenever I can get it. I also want to take a moment to thank Senate President Ferguson for giving us the space to reflect this month. I'm incredibly proud to serve alongside the incredible women in this chamber. Each of you is leading with strength, intelligence, compassion, and courage. We lift each other up, we have each other's backs, and together we are continuing to break barriers. Women's History Month is a celebration of that kind of leadership. It's about the trailblazers who came before us and the everyday women who carry forward their legacy, whether they're running for office, running a classroom, or running a household. It's about recognizing that our stories, our voices, and our experiences matter. So today I honor the women who paved the way before me to serve. I stand with the women serving alongside me. And I recommit to building a future my daughters and yours can dream even bigger and lead even bolder. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's see, can we open it for questions for members of our Women's Caucus?
Can I ask a policy question of the Women's Caucus? I see 2 EEE committee members here. I know Senate President Ferguson just mentioned the relief plan seed funds. Can you talk a little bit about what those look like for the energy bill?
I think Senator Hester and I might have different views on this. I'm Cheryl Kagan, Vice Chair of the Committee.
Can you come to the mic? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Cheryl Kagan, Vice Chair of the Committee. In these tough times, our constituents need relief, and this will be a visible and hopefully meaningful payment, 2 payments that will be appreciated. My concern is that it's not income tested, and $200 million is a lot of money in these tough times to give away with no litmus tests at all. That's my personal view. That's not the way the legislation passed, and perfect is the enemy of the good is something I used to say a lot and still do say. And so while I think the package is important and needed, I personally didn't love that one aspect. So thank you for asking, Hannah.
So how does that particular, how do the refunds work? How do the rebates work?
So there's a lot that is TBD, to be determined, but my understanding is that there are going to be two payments, one in the peak of summer months when everybody's using their air conditioning and having higher bills, one in the peak of winter when everyone's turning on their heat and having higher bills. And so the question is whether the name of the program, what it will be named, and how the money will be distributed. But it will be a line item on their bills.
What is
twice
the
a year,
amount?
And it's for one fiscal year, and then it sunsets. $200 million from the C Fund, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund.
But for each payment?
We haven't gotten that information, and I think that's why I said it's to be determined. I think the details, I don't know if the president has that information, but we did ask some of that, those questions in hearings, and I'm not sure that information is available yet.
So it's a flat payment that every single ratepayer gets, or is it?
Yeah, based on usage. And my concern is that someone in a mega mansion is going to get a whole lot of money, and someone who's trying to pinch their pennies will get a paltry amount, but have a greater need. Again, my opinion.
How would
Senator Hester may want to speak to that differently.
how would you be able to plan for that? Is there just not enough time this session to be able to include a part in the bill that would be able to account for the differences in socioeconomic status?
My understanding is that the data wasn't available. I was told by one utility that they do have access to low-income household data. What they don't have, what I understand that they don't have, is middle-income folks. And so, again, if I had a magic wand, I would give more to those who need it most and slightly less to those who need a little bit of help, and less or none to those who won't even notice it in their energy bills, who are very affluent. That may not be possible based on the data availability. Senator Hester, do you want to?
Any other questions for the caucus or any member of the caucus? Some have to go vote, so I don't want to hold them to that.
Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all. Yes.
Turning to the budget, if we can, really
Sure.
quickly. You mentioned that there are some differences, obviously, between the Senate and the House's version of this. Moving forward, can you explain, or do you anticipate the Senate scaling back any of the tax increases, whether it's for the general fund or the TTF that the Senate is interested in?
I mean, I think we have two slightly different versions in how it would be applied, particularly around, we are looking at the expansion of the sales tax on IT, data, AI services, and trying to make sure that we can tailor it appropriately. There are some issues that have arisen around licensing and IP that I think we're trying to adjust that we did not intend to capture within the expansion of the sales tax. And so, as with any policy, the details we're working through now. I believe by over the weekend and through this week, we'll kind of get to where is the most appropriate and what we were trying to get to from the front end. On the transportation side, I think there are a few differences in the Senate's numbers are a little bit lower than where the House's are, and we'll negotiate kind of a compromise, I imagine, in the middle.
Just for the IT services, what exactly are you looking at narrowly tailoring in terms of the IP? Can you just give us an example of it?
Yeah, there are certain IP technologies that are more royalty of nature than sort of a service tax or a sales tax. And so that was never anticipated to be incorporated within. There's also sports licensing and some of these other technologies that were not sort of the software as a service type of feature that we were focused in on with AI and the expansion of kind of technology platform services.
Does the amount of the tax change in the
It might. That's what we're trying to navigate. This is one of the challenges is that we don't necessarily capture this exactly as it would be applied. And so it's why in all of the fiscal notes, there was a significantly lower number in the first 2 years as it ramps up, because I think there was an expectation that there is an implementation delay of as different services are being applied. And so we're looking to different models. Texas has a certain model, Oregon has another model. And so we're trying to evaluate some of these technology services sales taxes from other states who have kind of litigated this quite a bit to understand which ones would be most appropriate for Maryland.
I'm sorry, clarifying, is the rate changing?
It's not the rate, it's not the rate, it's the, what would it be applied to? And this is very normal, you know, especially in today's modern economy. I mean, the comptroller's office on goods in and of itself often is getting challenged as to whether or not something is or is not a good. And so, you know, as technology has changed, we have seen the application of our revenue system change as well. And so that's a piece of all of this, is that with AI as a service, you know, we know that that's going to take what were formerly human jobs that we're going to have to be able to fund without an income tax coming from those individuals. And so this is the right time to kind of expand that sales tax to apply to the modern economy.
Mr. President, the budget this year, obviously, the proposal obviously handles or satisfies a balanced budget. Does it also attack the structural deficit?
It certainly does. I mean, I think anything where there is revenue or a reduction in PINs or the number of workers, that is a structural impact, because if you are reducing vacancies or eliminating vacancies, those are less positions that will be funded. If you change the vacancy rate, which we are doing, to increase the vacancy rate, saying we expect a certain number of PINs to stay vacant and therefore not funded, that is a structural impact. We have a number of formulas that are being impacted structurally that either level fund or adjust. The adjustments and cuts to the university system are base cuts, and so it rebases the formula. All of these are structural impacts.
So you've spoken previously about the triggers, the federal government spending cut triggers that are in the budget. Aside from Blueprint and Medicaid, are there any triggers?
Those are the big ones. Those are the big drivers. I mean, if you look, probably somewhere 45 to 50% of the budget is through healthcare and education. And so those are the two biggest drivers of cost and the places where we have the biggest risks of what happens with the federal fund pullback. And that's the most important component. You know, transportation is another one, but a lot of the transportation issues are more about match dollars as opposed to funding formulas that are entitlement based. They're more discretionary funds. And so we thought about doing something in transportation, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because those cuts will likely come on a more discretionary basis as opposed to what we'll see with the elimination of the Department of Education, or now we just see this horrible news of 20,000 people being laid off of Health and Human Services. You know, these are the types of things that we are anticipating will only become more draconian and have a bigger impact that we are trying to figure out how best to navigate. And so these bridge components that will give us time to evaluate if some of the worst things happen are really intended to put Maryland and the General Assembly in a place to be able to have as much information as possible to not just assume a cut, but to figure out a way to restore appropriately and financially sustainably.
Can you detail what the healthcare trigger looks like?
There's two different components that we've added in the Senate's version. One is related to any change to the federal match and Medicaid programs. Right now, the ACA expansion is a 90%, 10%, 90% Fed, 10% state. More recent reporting suggests that is a less likely avenue for for cuts to Medicaid to come. And you ask, why would that be? It is because of these trigger languages, I believe, that are in a number of 14 other states' laws that I think that there are folks in Congress, in the Republican Congress, that are looking at shift in the balance of percentage of federal state a little bit more skeptically because they know that it will have this impact immediately on states. And so that's one of the reasons that we think that it's important in Maryland is to make it clear there is a reality. If you change the federal match, it will have an impact on eligibility. And so that's part of the message and why it's important is that we don't have $1 billion sitting around to fund this. The other Medicaid match has to do is a little bit less direct because another option for cutting Medicaid is to turn it from an individual fee-for-service base and put it to a block grant. So it would be either a block grant at a predictably escalating level or a flat-funded block grant. Whatever it is, that means a cut because what we've seen in Medicaid costs is the escalation of the costs. If we are just getting a set block grant amount, it means that the services that are no longer being funded have to be funded somewhere else, and the only other place to look is the state. And so this one says that if there is a change towards a block grant, that we are requiring the state to provide a plan for how to have a sustainable glide path to adjusting to these eventual cuts to Medicaid.
Question about the blueprint.
Please.
Oh.
Oh,
Mr. President, regarding President Trump's announcement that he's going to put a 25% tax on the auto industry and foreign car goods, what are you thinking here in Maryland about the excise tax on cars and how those two will interplay?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the challenges, and it's one of the things that's forced us to adjust some of our plans. I mean, we were looking at a different excise tax level 2 weeks ago than we are in the Senate today, because we recognize that if we're putting a 25% tariff on cars, it is going to make cars in Maryland more expensive. I'm not sure anybody in the country voted to say, I would like to make cars more expensive. Maybe I'm wrong, but I missed the commercials that showed that. But with this administration, we are now seeing policies. There's consternation. We are struggling enormously here in Maryland about moderate changes to our income tax plans or moderate expansions of our sales tax base. This is a 25% tax on new cars. And that is apparently what the administration thinks is going to be a stimulant to the economy. So I'm blown away by the consternation that exists about moderate changes on Maryland's state level compared to these draconian 25% tax increases on cars. So that has had an impact, and we've had to adjust. We still want to see new cars bought and sold here in the state of Maryland, or new cars bought and used cars sold. And so we've adjusted the excise tax, recognizing that there's likely an impact. But also, when you look at the Port of Baltimore, one of our driving features of what makes us so economically productive is the export and import of cars and automobiles and roll-on, roll-off, which is like our sweet spot. We have to recognize, I've actually heard anecdotal stories of this massive rush of roll-on, roll-off cargo to the Port of Baltimore because everyone is expecting in the fall to there be just a complete cease of inventory. And what that means is kind of at the worst possible time, we're going to see a drop in economic activity. I know that there were a number of economists that just predicted a recession this fall. This is the reality of what we're seeing from the federal level.
Can you tell me what the Senate's rate is?
I believe we've landed somewhere around 625 or 635. I think we know that it's going to be negotiated. I think the House is around 675. And so, it'll be somewhere, I think, it'd be nice to land in a place around 635.
President Ferguson, you said that you're shocked about the reaction to the excise tax in Maryland when there's this 25% tariff coming out of DC. Do you see that as maybe hypocrisy on part of the Republican Party, or is the Maryland Republican Party just kind of a different animal than what we're seeing federally?
Look, I'll let opinion writers put labels on it. What I know and what I can say is that it seems crazy to me that in an industry as important as the automobile industry, with parts that go back and forth between Canada and the United States and Mexico, and 20 years of an industry being developed that is cross-border value-add industrial development, that we would say we are going to put a 25% tax on all of that economic activity that has led to some of the greatest innovation and economic growth in the country's history around the automobile industry. And so, I would love for some of my colleagues on the other side to point out the fact that there's a 25% tax, and it does seem very quiet. And we saw a fierce debate in the House. I'm certain that we'll have a strong debate in the Senate. And I just think, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think everyone should be approaching that we should be reducing taxes wherever possible. We want to keep money in the hands of Marylanders while protecting the safety net and protecting the infrastructure that helps to undergird the private economy. And so the idea of kind of celebrating 25% tariffs, a 25% tax increase on an important American good, that to me is just that's an ideological evangelical approach that is not good for anybody.
Mr. President, can you talk about the agreement that the chambers have reached on the blueprint?
Overall, I think there was a growing recognition that one of the components with the governor's office, and look, I do want to be very clear. I think it would have been very easy for the governor to have not introduced a plan that really laid out a path to bend the cost curve. And so I do appreciate the administration. I do believe that the administration wants to see the full realization of the blueprint, as does the Senate, and I'm certain as does the House. And I think where the governor and I certainly agree is that as we look out into the out years, there are some real strong headwinds for Maryland's economy and for our budget. And so we have to make some adjustments now that will impact 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now so that we can make sure that the plan is fully implemented. It is the most important policy in the state of Maryland, and we have to help it reach its fullest potential. It has to be measured, and it has to be at a rate that is sustainable. There is a recognition that one of the core components of the blueprint was that students who have more barriers to academic success need more to be successful and should have more to be successful. And so that's a core component that the Senate took a different approach than the governor did. Even though I understand why the governor moved forward trying to bend that cost curve, we found it appropriate to hold harmless some of the areas of students who are most at risk of academic struggling. And so the House restored all of those cuts. We really honed in on the teacher collaborative and think that that was the right place to maneuver, to bend the curve. And I think that we'll get to an agreement by the end.
So there isn't an agreement on some of the differences that remain between the chambers, where like the different approaches that they've had remain, and there's going to be.
Well, I think that, you know, on areas with comp ed and on special education and English as a second language, I think we agreed with the House that we wanted to kind of keep those weights the same. One area of difference I think that we might see between the chambers is that the Senate's position would allow for a little bit more flexibility at the school-by-school level. And that's a conversation we want to push in this last week because we know, and look, I worked in the school system before I was here. I worked in the central office of a school system. And I think sometimes we can get lost in the idea of kind of an academic exercise of what how something functions versus the on-the-ground reality. And the on-the-ground reality is that when you have a school system of 70,000 kids, you can get efficiencies at scale that are central office purchases. And so that makes it harder to distribute across all schools and how you account for it. And so I think adding a little bit more flexibility on a school-by-school basis on how the weights are allocated is something that makes a lot of sense for the practical application of the formula at the district level. And so that's a policy issue that I think we're going to try and navigate through in the next week.
When you're talking about the teacher collaborative, is that the 20% boosting to a 40% prepping students for individual lessons? Is that still a goal for you guys?
It is absolutely a goal. That is 100% where we should go. We see across the world that school districts, schools that have this component of collaborative time within the school day are the most successful. But we also know there is a reality of the teacher shortage that exists. And right now, when we passed the blueprint, 900 uncertified teachers. Today, 6,500 uncertified teachers. And so when we talk about having the career ladder, what was 900, now 6,500 are not even on that career ladder because they are uncertified and they need to get certified in order to participate in some of the larger, most important parts of the teacher investment component of the blueprint. So we have to deal with that problem first. And as any big plan, it is a vision. We should be adjusting along the way. We think that it's kind of a measured 4-year pause in this as we work to get those 6,500 uncertified towards certification is the right way to refocus and reprioritize.
On the direct payments to ratepayers, how much negotiation still needs to happen on that, or is the Senate kind of settled in its position?
I mean, I think we're very much in the large framework of it. There is clear agreement. The application of how it gets done, and you heard from Senator Kagan, we've gone through lots of different iterations of what is the most efficient way to do this? What is a way that it can be done without it causing a tax implication for people, which is something that we initially thought, could we just make a direct distribution, but that would probably come with some tax implication down the line a year from now, which we certainly didn't want to trigger. And so the most efficient way to get it done is through residential usage. We do have a number of programs that assist low-income Marylanders with utility bills, the fuel fund, and some of the Empower programs to help the lowest income Marylanders. And really what we're seeing, and where I think there's a bit of a, look, this is the beauty of the Senate, is that there are kind of differences of opinion on the margins. We fundamentally agree on the value. It's how do you get there? We're really concerned for those who are not eligible for the lowest income funds, but who are not wealthy. And that middle gap is really feeling the pinch. And so we wanted to make sure that we could target resources for those ratepayers, those families who are really struggling to make their grocery budgets work, to buy clothes for kids for school. And the challenge is, we know probably the highest earners and those with the largest homes probably don't need it as much. The challenge is just the data existing when we're relying on utilities for income levels to be able to create a program that is, that can get out there rapidly. And so I think basing it on usage for residential customers was the most efficient way to make sure we could get to those, that middle group.
When you say usage, do you mean that it would be the more usage you have, the more you receive?
The larger the larger the relief. It would be based on just like rates are, where rates are based on kilowatt usage on the electric side, it would be a similar type of rebate.
Is this a one-year program or is it multi-year? Is it something that needs to be revisited next session?
It's a one-year program as it is. I mean, if we just had a question about the structural deficit, it's one of those things that we want to be very mindful, and we're here every year. So it is a one-year program, but we are making the fund have the allowable use for rebates for the C fund. And so while it is being appropriated for this 1 year, we'll see where we are a year from now. Ideally, our energy package starts to have a bit of an impact. You know, the goal was to have a short-term impact, a mid-term impact, and a long-term impact. And that's what this energy leadership package really represents next week. That'll be on the floor.
Where are things with the estate tax and inheritance tax?
Both are removed. The governor's plans are removed on this. So they are, at least in the Senate's plans, there is no impact on the estate tax and no impact on the
No change.
inheritance. No change.
Going back to the
Real quick, Mr.
budget,
President.
oh, sorry.
Yeah. I don't think I got.
This is on the same line.
Yeah.
The governor likes to tell reporters that he wants larger, broader tax relief for the middle class. Any more changes to his tax code plan? And it's my understanding the House took out a corporate tax cut. You're gonna put that back in?
Right now, we're not touching the corporate income tax, and we're also not touching combined reporting in this version. So, you know, the idea of the corporate tax cut was tied to combined reporting. We've just eliminated that to simplify the plan. I'm not aware of any additional plans on the governor's referencing. I suspect he might be talking about the conference committee report that we are incorporating a small increase in the standard deduction and including adjustments to itemized deductions. We were concerned about a number of those folks who were in between $80,000 to $200,000 of family income, having their itemized deductions lost was going to have an impact. And so the plan that has been now adjusted, 94% of people will, on the income tax side, and would be very specific, on the income tax side, 94% of Marylanders will not be impacted or will receive a small cut. So that's the only thing I could think that he's referencing. Oh, yeah, I'll give you, Rachel, give you your last one. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you are reducing the rate of the excise tax from the House version of the budget, but I know that the goal was to reach a certain top line number for the Transportation Trust Fund. Are there additional taxes that are making up that difference?
Our plan has a few other specific pieces. One includes an assessment on tires, just like we have for the recycling fee, and this is recognizing there's been a lot of chatter around vehicles miles traveled, but there are concerns around kind of privacy and how that would actually be instrumental. And tires actually serve as kind of an interesting proxy for vehicle miles traveled. The more you use your car, the more tires you use. So similar to the gas tax, it is a user fee. This is something that both electric vehicles and combustion engines also all need tires, and electric vehicles are often heavier and have more wear and tear. And so we have a tire fee associated specifically for the Transportation Trust Fund, and we'll go to roads and bridges repair to help make up some of the differences. What
is that fee?
I have to remember, I think we're at $5 on a tire.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.